Chapter 3. Our First Venture. The night was as cold as the day had been hot, but thanks to our tent we slept very well with our hard day's work. The rooster woke me up at sunrise, and I awoke my wife to talk privately. We agreed that our first duty was to search for the sailors. Investigating the local resources was also important. After breakfast, she said, "Perhaps you and Fritz should go exploring along the coast. The younger boys and I will see what we can accomplish around here." Her plan made sense. I went to the boys. "Wake up, my sons," I cried cheerfully. "Come help your mother with breakfast." "All we have is soup," she said, smiling. "Jack, where's your fine lobster?" I asked. "I put it in this hole in the rock, Father, so the dogs wouldn't eat it." "Very sensible," I remarked. "Even my impulsive Jack learns wisdom. Good thing it's so large it can be food when we go exploring." The last words sent the children wild with delight, leaping and clapping for joy. "Steady there," I said. "We can't all go. This will be too dangerous and tiring for you younger ones. Fritz and I will go. We will take Turk and leave Juno to guard you. Fritz, prepare the guns and tie up Juno." At the word guns, poor Fritz reddened in shame. He tried in vain to straighten his weapon. I let him work on this for a while, and then I gave him permission to take another gun, satisfied he had learned half of his lesson. A moment later he tried to collar Juno, but the dog remembered how Fritz had treated her the night before and growled a low warning. Turk did likewise. They would not come until I called them myself. Fritz went to his mother in tears, asking, "Mother, I want to give them my breakfast biscuits." With her consent, Fritz took the food to the suspicious dogs. Fortunately, the dogs are not vengeful. Juno accepted the food and allowed Fritz to pet her. But Turk was still wary and stayed back. "Give him a claw of my lobster," cried Jack. "I was going to give it to you anyway, for your journey." Fritz did so and won Turk over, and then we each took a gun, a small hatchet, and a game bag. Fritz stuck a pair of pistols into his belt, and we packed the rest of the lobster and some biscuits along with with flasks of water. Almost all was ready. "Stop!" I exclaimed. "We have forgotten something very important." "Surely not," said Fritz. "Surely so," I said. "What of our morning prayer? We must not forget our faith." After we prayed, I cautioned my wife and younger children to stay near camp. When I was satisfied that my sons would do so, Fritz and I said our goodbyes, and we were nervous but excited at the prospect of exploring a new land. Our first obstacle was the stream with its rocky banks. I could see no signs of regular crossing until we moved upstream. This pleased me because it meant our camp was in a relatively isolated spot and therefore likely safe. Fritz and I moved upstream until we came to a large waterfall, and then a shallow spot with enough large rocks to let us cross. This put the sea on our left. Away to our right was a long line of cliffs and rocky hills dotted with clumps of trees. The long tangled grass made for slow going. We had scarcely gone 50 yards when something rustled behind us. We stopped in alarm. Something was moving through the grass. We could not tell what. Fritz turned coolly, trained his gun on the movement, yet held his fire. Out rushed trusty Turk, whom we had forgotten. My thoughtful wife must have sent him. Fritz lowered his gun and smiled. "You behaved wisely and bravely," I told him, "not to fire without being sure of your target. Well done." "Thank you, Father," answered Fritz, still embarrassed at his lapse the day before. "But this exposes a danger. What if a fierce beast were to sneak up on us here?" "Well observed, my son," I replied. "We would be far safer on the beach." We hastened down to the open seashore. The view was lovely, a background of hills, tall grass above the tide line, and groups of trees here and there. We searched the smooth sand for any trace of our unfortunate companions, but found no footprints. "Shall I fire a shot or two?" asked Fritz. "That would bring them, if they heard it." "If there are any hostile inhabitants, it would bring them too," I replied. "No, let us search carefully but quietly." "But why, Father, should we bother about the sailors? They left us to die. I don't care to see them again." "Because we are not like them, my boy," I said. "Think of the help they could give us in building a house of some sort, and perhaps other ways. Finally remember that they took nothing with them. They must be starving." But, Father, we are wasting our time with almost no hope of helping them. Why aren't we returning to the ship to save the animals who may help us? When you have many tasks to choose from, always choose the one that gives the clearest advantage, I answered. Saving a human life is a higher calling than comforting a few animals who have plenty of food. Also, the sea is calm and will not dislodge the wreck. We pushed on into a pleasant grove stretching down to the water's edge and sat down under a large tree to rest. A tiny stream splashed past us. 1,000 brightly feathered birds flew overhead. As Fritz and I gazed up at them, my son jumped up. "A monkey!" he exclaimed. "I'm almost sure I saw a monkey." He sprang around the tree, stumbling over a small, round, hairy object. He picked it up and handed it to me, saying, "A round bird's nest. I have heard of these." "You may have," I said, laughing, "but this is a coconut. We'll break the shell, and you will see the nut inside." With some difficulty we split it open, but the inside was dry and crumbly. "What?" cried Fritz. "I always thought a coconut was full of delicious sweet liquid like almond milk." "At first it is," I replied, "but it dries to a hard kernel. When the nut falls on good soil, the seed bursts through to form a new tree. Now, let's try to find a better one." That was not easy, for coconuts fall only when they are overripe. We finally found one with liquid inside. It was a bit oily and rancid, but we could find no better. Feeling refreshed, we decided to save our lunch for later and marched on. A dense thicket overgrown with vines gave way to seashore with an open view. The forest swept inland, and here and there were some odd-looking trees. Fritz noticed them and exclaimed, "Father, look at these strange shapes hanging down." As we got closer, I recognized them as calabash trees, dotted with gourds of all shapes. In some parts of the world, people make spoons, bowls, and bottles of such gourds. People even cook food in them, I explained. "That's impossible," returned Fritz. "The fire would burn through the rind." "They don't put the gourd on the fire. First they clean out the gourd, and then they split it. A half is filled with water, then with fish or whatever, and the cook then adds red-hot stones until the water boils. This cooks the food without damaging the gourd." "That is very clever. I'm sure I would have thought of it had I tried," said Fritz. "Perhaps so," I said, and left it at that. "Let's prepare some of these and take them home." Fritz took up a gourd and tried to split it equally with his knife, but this blade slipped and made a jagged cut. "Spoiled!" he exclaimed, throwing it down, "and it looks so easy to split." "Patience," I said. "Those pieces are still useful. Try to make a couple of spoons from them while I make a dish." I then took out a piece of string, which I tied as tightly as I could around a gourd. I tapped the string with the back of my knife until it penetrated the outer shell, and then drew the string as tight as I could. The gourd fell, divided, just as I wished. "How clever!" cried Fritz. "Where did you get that idea?" "I read about it in travel books," I smiled. "It certainly makes a good soup plate," said Fritz, examining the gourd. "But how would one make a bottle?" "Even easier," I said. "Cut a round hole at one end and then scoop out the interior. Then drop in some stones and shake it loosely to loosen any remaining debris. And that would complete the bottle." "But that would be more like a small barrel, Father." "True, my boy. For best results, you must plan ahead. To give a gourd a neck, for example, you bind the top while it is still young. All but the tied parts will swell as it grows." As I spoke, I filled the gourds with sand and left them to dry, meaning to return for them on our way back. For 3 hours or more we advanced, keeping a sharp lookout for more trace of our companions. We stopped at a point where a bold, steep hill stretched away into the sea as a peninsula. The rocky summit looked easy to reach and could offer us a fine view, so we climbed up. Before us stretched a wide, lovely bay, fringed with yellow sands, enclosed by 2 shadowy ridges of land. The surface was a sheet of rippling water that reflected the glorious sun. The scene inland was as lovely as Fritz and I both felt a shade of loneliness. It lacked one key element. There was no sign of human beings, either our shipmates or others. Remember, Fritz, I said, that we had already chosen to become settlers. God certainly granted our wish. We didn't expect to be quite so alone. But let us trust in God and try to live comfortably here. Be glad we all survived and washed up on a fertile island. I mopped my forehead and continued, a hot one, too. Let's find some shade before we broil. We descended through the dense thicket of bamboo-like reeds, working our way toward a nearby clump of palm trees. This was hard work and dangerous, for it would be easy to step on some poisonous snake. I sent Turk ahead and then cut a reed, thinking it might be more useful against a snake than my gun. A thick juice seeped from one end, and I tasted it and found it sweet and pleasant. It was sugar cane. I wished Fritz to discover this, so I advised him to cut a cane for his defense. His reed split, covering his hands with thick juice, and he took a careful taste, and then another, and then exclaimed, Father, this is sugar cane. Let's take a lot home to Mother. Gently I said, cut some if you like, but no more than you can conveniently carry. In spite of my warning, my son cut a dozen or more of the largest canes and tucked them under his arm. We then pushed through the cane brake to the clump of palms. As we entered it, a troop of monkeys scrambled into the tree tops, seeming to make fun of us. Fritz raised his gun. No, I objected. Never kill any animal without need. A live monkey up in the trees is more useful than a dozen dead at our feet. Watch. I threw a small stones in the monkeys' direction, and the monkeys began to pick and hurl all the coconuts within reach. Fritz was delighted, perhaps because we managed to dodge all the missiles. He rushed forward to pick some up, and we pierced them for the milk. The taste was not exactly pleasant, but it quenched our thirst. Much tastier was the solid cream lining the shells. When we scraped it off and ate, Fritz put some of the milk in his flask, and after a delicious meal we gave Turk the lobster. After he devoured it, we began to gnaw the ends of the sugar cane and to beg for coconut. I slung a couple of the nuts over my shoulder, and Fritz picked up his burden for our homeward march. He soon found a heavy one. He began to shift the canes from shoulder to shoulder and then carried them under his arm and finally stopped short with a sigh. I had no idea, he said, that a few reeds would be so heavy. Patience and courage, my boy, I said. Let us each take a fresh one, and then we'll fasten the bundle crosswise with your gun. We savored the sugary juice as we pressed on. I can hardly wait to see Ernst's face when he drinks this coconut milk, commented Fritz. By then, it will probably be vinegar. The sun's heat will ferment it. Vinegar? How horrid! Let me see, cried Fritz, hastily pulling the cork from the flask. The contents came out with a loud pop and a foamy spray like champagne. There, I said, laughing as he tasted this new luxury. Moderation, son. I'm sure it's delicious, but if you drink too much, you will feel it. Father, it's wonderful. Try some. Vinegar indeed. This is like excellent wine. This unexpected treat gave us new energy, so on we went, picking up the gourds we had left. A little further on, Turk suddenly darted away from us towards a troop of monkeys playing around on the ground. He had been hungrier than we realized. Before we could stop him, he was tearing a monkey to shreds. His luckless victim was the mother of a tiny little monkey, trembling in the grass as he watched his mother's tragic fate. Fritz rushed to the rescue, but was far too late to save the mother. No sooner did the tiny monkey catch sight of him than it leapt to his shoulder in a single bound. Fritz's curly hair was an excellent handhold. My son screamed and leaped around to dislodge the creature, but it only clung tighter. I laughed so much that I wasn't any help to Fritz. He seems determined to adopt you, I suggested, chuckling. Perhaps he senses that you will someday be a fine father. Or perhaps, Fritz said, shaking his head back and forth, the rascal guesses that I am too soft-hearted to mistreat an animal that has begged my protection. But, Father, can we talk about his motives after you help me get him off? He's yanking my hair. At last, by coaxing the monkey with a bit of biscuit and gradually detangling its small claws from Fritz's curls, I managed to relieve poor Fritz. He looked with interest at the baby monkey in my arms, no bigger than a kitten. What a jolly little fellow, he exclaimed. May I try to raise it, Father? Would probably do until we can bring the cows and goats. If he lives, he might be helpful, for I have read that monkeys know which fruits are safe to eat. He's yours, I said. After all, you made a brave effort to save the mother's life. You must train her child carefully, or he will cause us a lot of mischief. Meanwhile, Turk was devouring the unfortunate mother. Fritz wished to make him stop, but I could not deny Turk his meal. Besides, Turk stood 3 feet high and was immensely broad-shouldered, as mastiffs are. He likely outweighed me, and a starving dog the size of Turk could be very dangerous to the family. We had no wish to watch him eat, however, so we loaded up and resumed our march. As we walked, Fritz said, I'll have to find a way to protect this monkey from Turk. Don't worry, I said. Although Turk will attack strange beasts, he will soon regard your little monkey as a member of our family. Heaven has given us dogs and horses as our allies, and a mounted man with a pack of trained dogs can face any wild beast in the world, even a lion or a pack of hyenas. Thoughtfully, Fritz replied, What a pity that our horse died during our voyage and left us with only a donkey. He is large and strong, I said. If we can get him safe on land, he may do for us what a horse would. We already know we can provide him an excellent pasture to thrive on. The tiny monkey sat on Fritz's shoulder. I helped to carry his canes, and we were some distance along before Turk overtook us, licking his chops. He took no notice of the monkey, but the tiny creature scrambled down into Fritz's arms. Fritz found this so convenient that he came up with a plan. Calling Turk in fine tones of authority, Fritz seated the monkey on the dog's back and secured it with a cord, then put a second string around the dog's neck for reins. Pulling this into a comical rider's hands, my son said, Having slain the parents, Mr. Turk, you can now carry the son. Neither liked this arrangement at first, but they soon accepted it. Before long, the monkey rode along like a human out for a pleasure ride. We look like a couple of traveling showmen on their way to the fair, I said. The children will have quite a laugh. Before long, we approached the rocky stream bank close to camp. Juno was the first to detect our approach. Barking her loudest, Turk answered in his own deep voice. His little rider panicked, slipping out of the cord, and took refuge on Fritz's shoulder. Finding himself free, Turk dashed forward to meet Juno. One after another, our dear ones came running to the opposite bank, cheering our return, and it was a happy reunion indeed. It did not take the boys long to find the monkey. They launched an unanswerable barrage of exclamations and questions. A monkey? A monkey? Oh, how splendid! Where did Fritz find him? What can we give him to eat? What is that bundle of sticks? I let the excitement die down a little before speaking. I am glad to see you all safe. Our expedition was successful, except we found no trace of our shipmates. If it is God's will that we be alone here, said my wife, let us rejoice that we are all together. I have been worried sick over you two, but now that you are finally back, I know my fears must seem foolish. Now, please let us take those heavy loads, and then tell us your adventures. Jack shouldered my gun. Ernst took the coconuts, and little Franz carried the gourds. Fritz distributed the sugar cane amongst his brothers, handed Ernst his gun, and placed the monkey on Turk's back. Ernst soon found his load too heavy, and his mother offered to help. When Ernst gave up the coconuts, his elder brother exclaimed, Ernst, are you going to hand them over these coconuts without even tasting them? What, are they really coconuts? Cried Ernst. I thought they were bowls. I'll carry them, please, mother. No, thank you, replied my wife with a smile. I would not want you to be overburdened. But I can throw away these useless sticks and carry the coconuts easily. Worse and worse, said Fritz. Did you ever hear of sugar cane? The words were scarcely out of his mouth when Ernst began to suck on the end of the cane, but without result. Here, said Fritz, let me show you the trick. Poking a hole so that the air could enter, he soon had all his brothers extracting the luscious juices. My wife was delighted. The sugar would be gone for cooking. and with the new dishes we could eat more like civilized beings. We would soon try them out, for my family had prepared a delicious meal. 2 forked sticks were planted in the ground on either side of the fire, supporting a rod with several tempting-looking fish. A goose, or so I thought, hung from another rod, while the gravy dripped into a large shell. Franz gave the spit another turn, proudly claiming that it was his job to keep dinner from burning. In the center sat the great pot full of delicious soup. On top of it all, one of the barrels was opened, and it contained Dutch cheese. My wife had overseen a tremendous amount of worthy effort, and Fritz and I were hungry, but I was about to beg her to spare the poultry until we could breed more. She sensed my anxiety and explained, "This is not one of our geese. It is a wild bird Ernst killed." "Yes," said Ernst, "a penguin, I think. It let me get close enough to knock it on the head with a stick. Here, I saved its head and feet to show you. I noticed the narrow, down-curved bill and webbed feet. It had funny little useless wings, and its eyes looked so solemn that I was almost ashamed to kill it. Did you agree that it must have been a penguin?" "Without a doubt, my boy," I answered. Before I could say anything, my wife called us to dinner. Fritz now remembered his delicious wine and gave the flask to his mother to taste. "Try it yourself," I said. Fritz did, and I saw that from his face it had turned to vinegar. He explained to his mother. "Never mind," said my wife. "We already have wine, but no vinegar, so this is excellent. Mixed with the fat from our roasting bird, it will make a delicious sauce." Indeed it did, masking the penguin's fishy flavor and enhancing the fish. We did full justice to this impressive meal, using our gourds for the first time. For dessert, I produced the coconuts. "Here is better food for our little friend," I said to Fritz, who could not get the monkey to eat bits of our food. The poor little animal had only had its mother's milk. "One of you, fetch me a saw." After extracting the milk from the natural holes in the coconut, I carefully cut the shells in half to provide several more bowls. Fritz dipped a handkerchief in the milk, and the baby monkey sucked eagerly at it. The sun was now rapidly sinking, so we prepared for sleep. After our prayer, we lay down on our beds. The monkey crouched down between Jack and Fritz, and we all soon fell fast asleep. But not for long. Our dog's barking awakened us, and we heard the fluttering and cackling of the birds. Fritz and I sprang up, seized our guns, and rushed out into the middle of a desperate battle. Our gallant dogs were surrounded by a dozen or more large jackals. These fierce, wild, dog-like creatures, while not as large as our mastiffs, were not small. Turk and Juno had fought well, to judge by the 4 jackals already dead, but the rest continued to attack. Fritz and I sent bullets through the heads of 2 more. The rest fled. Unsatisfied, the dogs chased and caught another jackal, which they quickly killed and began to devour. Fritz wished to save a jackal to show his brothers in the morning, so he dragged his dead target to a concealed spot near the tent. I told him that if our dogs were still hungry, we must let them have this last jackal, but they were already satisfied and curled up to sleep. We did the same.